Welcome back to another episode of the Your Houston podcast. This is your host, Mario Castillo, and today we're speaking with Gracie Saenz for the second episode of our Hispanic Heritage Month series, and we'll be talking all about LULAC Council 60. Before we get into that, a little bit more about Gracie. If you don't know, she was the first citywide elected Latina in 1992 when she won her election to City Council position at large 1. She later became named Mayor Pro Tem by Mayor Bob Lanier and was the first Latina ever to be named to this position. In addition to her public service through City Council, Gracie has been the recipient of numerous awards throughout her career, to include the Hispanic Women of the Year from the Mexican American Opportunity Foundation, the Hispanic Women's Leadership Hall of Fame, Outstanding Citizen Award from the Boy Scouts, the International Service Award from the Houston Junior Chamber of Commerce, a Woman on the Move twice, as she's been recognized by the University of Houston and has received the Distinguished Service Award by the College of Law and Faculty from the U of H Alumni Association. Most recently, she was awarded the Distinguished Lifetime Achievement Award by the City of Houston for all of her community work. She also serves on the boards of nonprofits and other organizations that include the University of St. Thomas, Project Grad, Project Self Foundation, the Houston Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, and the Memorial Hermann Hospital System. We're really excited to get the chance to speak with her today to learn more about LULAC Council 60 and all the ways that you can get involved and support the work that they do. We really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to speak with us, Gracie, and share the story of LULAC Council 60 and its history and what is going on today. Before we dive into all of that, we want to take a little time to get to know you a little more. So we're going to go into what we call our Liftoff Round.
I feel the liftoff. The clock has started. Roger.
What is your favorite restaurant to go to in Houston?
Well, it depends on the time of day.
Okay.
So for breakfast, I sometimes like to go to the LULAC House or my husband's counter here. For lunch, again, it depends on all sorts of things. Carrabba's is one of my favorite places, as well as El Tiempo.
Mm-hmm.
But I usually like to go to El Tiempo in the evenings. And of course, after being out clubbing and everything, I like to go to Don Carlos Mexican restaurant out here in the East Side. So it just kind of depends on the mood I'm in. To tell you the truth, Mario, we have some incredible restaurants. We are so fortunate here in Houston.
We sure are.
We can eat anything and everything and at a reasonable price, so Vietnamese food, Chinese food, to Indian, to, it's just amazing what we can get our hands on.
It is. It's one of the reasons why, these questions will typically change somewhat from guest to guest, but that's always the first one because you want to know where people go. What's their favorite? There's so many options, and I can't tell you how many great places I've tried just from asking people here what their favorite restaurant is.
Just take one. No, it doesn't work that way. You can't do it.
Okay. So rodeo season is coming up. Who would you like to see, or if you could book a rodeo musical act for next year, who would you pick?
Selena.
Oh, yeah.
I actually got to see her, perform in the rodeo, and I actually got to greet her because at that time I was on City Council. So we got that option, and oh my God, it was amazing. The show, she just was the greatest number of people that had attended thus far. And the performance just spectacular. I just can't even begin to tell you. Now, that's who I would love to see. I don't know. At this point, it's not possible. But I'm sure we could probably have some good impersonators along the way. But in the meantime, I would like to see Tejano music come back. I really do. I really, really would like to see some good Tejano bands to come back. I grew up with, of course, with Mas, Little Joe,
Yep.
and a lot of the older Tejano bands, and so it would be good.
I actually was at the show as well as a kid.
Really? Oh
Mhm.
my gosh.
It was just a couple of days after my birthday, and I was a huge Selena fan, and so my mom and one of my aunts and cousins, we went, and it's a highlight that I still remember. And what a sad tragedy, but I mean, we grew up listening to Tejano music. I grew up listening to Kaku Kuka in the radio,
Right,
in the
right.
car, everywhere my parents drove. So
Sure.
all those people you named, I could probably still, if the song comes on, I'll probably still sing it.
Little Joe and the Latineers, the Sunliners. I mean, it was just like you can go on and on and on. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Emilio was
Uh-huh.
also one of my favorite. So yeah. It's funny because I learned how to dance polka, right? My polkas here in the barrio. And then, we ended up going to Germany one year, and they would have these polka dancing contests, and we would always win them.
Yeah.
That's kind of weird, right?
They weren't
Anyway,
expecting that.
they weren't expecting that one.
Okay. Tell us about one of the more, memorable or impactful books that you've read.
Wow. The Bible is probably one of the most impactful books that I've ever read. Scripture, it's very impactful, and so I've been reading lately some books. One of is in connection with the Hernandez case, the state of Texas versus Hernandez, and it has to do with the history of the attorneys that actually tried the case or handled the case for the Mexican American community. And it involved the lack of jurors, that, you're supposed to be judged by a jury of your peers. And at that time, that particular area in South Texas did not have any Mexican Americans serving on the jury. They contended that since we were considered white and they were white on the juries, that we had nothing to complain about. So they took it all the way to the Supreme Court,
Oh, wow.
and it was it was a real challenge. And it was the first time actually that the Supreme Court actually acknowledged that the Mexican American community was a separate group. It was an identifiable group, and that it was protected under the Equal Protection Clause. So yes, that's what I read late at night, right? As an attorney, I mean, I just find it fascinating, some of the things that have evolved because of the law.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Especially with respect to civil rights. And I mean,
Exactly.
it makes perfect sense. So this is one of our episodes featured for Hispanic Heritage Month. Can you tell us about a Latino or Latina leader that inspires you?
Sonia Sotomayor, of course, and she was amazing, and being the first Supreme Court justice. So Puerto Riqueña even, but she definitely is high up there. Dolores Huerta is another, Latina pioneer that I've always admired, who was part of the farm workers, civil rights. And she worked side by side with Cesar Chavez, and many times she was the strategist. She actually was out there, involved in the actual protests and involved in the actual bringing to light the injustices that the farm workers were suffering.
Yep.
So Dolores Huerta is another one of mine. Selena, of course, is another Latina that I've always held in high esteem, not only because of her wonderful talent, but because she also was you know, she was a very great success. She had been able to, launch her clothing line. She was a businesswoman, an entrepreneur, and that's a part of the story that I think a lot of people have failed to recognize. She was also one of the first crossover artists. She had been singing in Spanish for many years, and she was finally able to cross over into the English community or English music genre. And then, of course, this tragedy happened. So she was a success even after her death.
Oh yeah.
And not only in the United States. That's the other thing that a lot of people do not know, is that her recognition and her famous, her songs were enjoyed by all of Latin America, and everywhere from Europe to South America to Central America. She's just an incredible artist, and it was international. So that's the other thing. Can I continue down the list of women that I have admired?
You've named some heavy hitters. And I think all of them, I mean, they're all fantastic choices. And I know that Dolores Huerta will do some event, at least before the pandemic. She would still do some things in Houston, and people.
She was recognized at the Holocaust Museum, I believe, and actually an exhibit of the farm workers was at the Holocaust Museum, which was just fascinating. And I actually have her on a mural on the side of my law office. Along with other, personalities. We have Emiliano Zapata, Dolores Huerta. We have Frida Kahlo, Diego Rivera.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's quite an impressive mural. It is painted by Eric Castillo, who is one of the artists here in the East Side. His artist's name is Cutthroat.
Well, I think we appreciate, you shared some wonderful insights with us, and I think we got to know you a little better there. So thank you for that. We are really glad to have you and to talk about LULAC Council 60 and LULAC in general. I mean, it's a organization that has a lot of history, has done so much for civil rights. Let's just start by talking about some of the history here, specifically in Houston with Council 60.
Well, right now, our organization, our local LULAC Council 60, it's historic. It was actually started here in Houston in 1935. So the actual League of United Latin American Citizens started in South Texas. And one of the first councils that was developed was in Corpus Christi. That was back in 1924 and about 24, 25. Again, it was dealing with a lot of the discrimination and injustices that many Mexican American citizens were experiencing during that time and throughout the years, needless to say. So during the Depression, there was a huge removal of Mexican citizens throughout the Southwest. And along with them, there were quite a few US citizens that were deported. And I shouldn't say deported, because deported means that you had a hearing. But in this case, a lot of the railroad companies actually rounded up families and put them on railroad cars and sent them back to Mexico. It was called repatriation back to Mexico. Now you ask, well, how do you really know that, Gracie? Well, my father was one. My father was actually born here in Houston in 1926. And when he was about 6 years old, he was part of this removal. And I say removal because that's what it was. And they're estimated that close to 600,000 to 1 million people were removed from the Southwest. So it involved California, New Mexico, Arizona, Texas, even Louisiana, and some in Oklahoma. What people fail to understand is that many laborers came from Mexico into the United States during the early 1900s and during the revolution that was taking place down there. And they had established roots. And here in Houston, we had a very vibrant Hispanic Mexican community very successful, that was part of the Segundo Barrio, second ward. Back in those days, again, Houston was segregated. And so the Mexicanos lived in the second ward. And so that's where a lot of our families were housed. My father was born off of Jensen and Clinton. He remembered, well, the house was there, and eventually they moved the house into the fifth ward. And that's where we were born. I was born in El Crisol, the Barrio El Crisol, in the fifth ward. And it was named El Crisol. And for the longest time, I didn't know why it was called El Crisol. I thought it had to do something with the sun, right? El Crisol. But it was the crisol plant that the railroad companies were manufacturing and were using for the railroad ties.
Yeah.
And all of that smell and everything. And of course, now they find out that it's a cancer cluster in that area.
Yep.
But that's where I had grown up. Fortunately, we moved out towards the north part of town eventually. And so that. Now, what was your question, Money? This is all part of my history.
It is. And this is all fascinating, especially to hear about your father and his experience. I mean, that happened to so many.
It did.
And that's, you think about that happening in our country, and it's just like, wow, this is the facts and the reality.
And when people say, we're just going to remove all these people, and we kept saying, how can you do this? Well, it has happened in our history. My father, fortunately, was able to come back to the United States. At first, he talks about the fact that he came in as an undocumented, but he was able to prove his U.S. citizen birth by the fact that he had been baptized at Our Lady of Guadalupe. And that particular Catholic church was actually built for Los Mexicanos here in Houston, again, because it was segregated. And as the story goes, right, all of these things are happening to our community in Texas. And so the League of United Latin American Citizens came together to really try to bolster and educate our community as to their rights as citizens of the United States. And that became a major goal for them to help community integrate and understand their rights and get them to know how to fight back if those rights were in any way infringed upon. So we had the Clubhouse actually came into being. So our chapter started in the late 1930s, but the house was not bought until 1935.
Okay, this is where your
the Clubhouse
were. Okay,
yes, we had the council had met and off of navigation for many years, but they kept getting harassed by the police. And so they had to find a place where they could congregate without the fear of police barging in. And so that's what gave them the impetus to buy their own building. And so it was bought in 1955. There was a down payment made by then one of our more successful entrepreneurs, Felix Tijerina, from the Tijerina restaurants. And or Felix's restaurant it was called. And he made the down payment, and the council designated a certain number of their members to be owners of the actual house. The members would then raise funds to pay the taxes and the upkeep. Throughout the years, this house went into disrepair. And then when Hurricane Harvey hit, it really went into disrepair.
Oh, wow.
It was damaged very much. So the effort right now is to help, restore it. And we have a Facebook page people can visit if they wish to donate. It's council60clubhouse.com. And it's called the LULAC House Project. The house itself is considered a national treasure by the National Trust for Historic Preservation. This designation was given after the history and what took place in the house was actually researched and found. Many things that have happened in Houston have not just impacted the city, but the state and the country. Um, One of the focus of this organization has been education from the very get-go. And they recognize that many of our children that were entering into kindergarten were always behind their
Mm-hmm.
peers. And so what they started was they called it La Escuelita de Cuatrocientos. And that basically was an attempt to teach the children before they entered kindergarten 400 basic English words.
Oh, wow.
And as that particular program started, there was great success in our children being able to not only attend, but also to retain them in school long enough for them to be able to go on and graduate and eventually, go on to higher education. That program was then what the basis upon which Project Head Start at the federal level, at the national level, got started.
Wow. So that was the
So the model, as they
Yep.
say.
Wow.
And so Project Head Start was started. At that time, they said the Johnsons, Lady Bird Johnson was familiar with it, and so was President Johnson. They were teachers at one time, or he was a teacher
Mm-hmm.
in the community. So they launched the Project Head Start. The other program that got started was another project that was because as our young military soldiers, veterans were returning from war, many times they could not find employment when they got home. And the reason was always that they were not skilled laborers, they were not skilled workers. So what's the solution? You got to train them. So what they decided to do was they proceeded to get a grant from the Navy that would start a training program. And that started the SARE, Jobs for Progress. And SARE is now national.
Yep.
It's a training program that is found in different communities. It has grown tremendously here in the Houston area. But it got its start because of LULAC Council. And many of the members of the council were part of the original organization of SARE Jobs. The other program was housing. And I think you'd appreciate the fact that housing is also one of those areas that we need to grow in.
Yep.
It's one of those scenarios that we say we have needs and we are not there yet. So housing was another initiative that was started. And that particular program had impetus also in LULAC Council 60. The National LULAC Housing Commission got started. And so from there, it took off to the Department of Housing and Urban Development at the national level.
What a legacy. I mean,
right?
you're talking about these programs that are national federal programs that are
And
tied.
the ideas that
Right.
got started in that house, in that LULAC house, and by the members coming together and coming up with solutions and to the issues and the problems, and not being afraid to address them, because many of the members were attorneys and entrepreneurs and businessmen. So they were cultivating a sense of power and a sense of making sure that their voice was heard. And we continue that even today. So many civil rights issues were dealt with by the members of this organization. Many times people are dealing with all sorts of issues, being oppressed, being excluded, being harassed. Even today, when it's kind of sad to think in El Paso that someone would come and just, shoot up a store, and because they were Mexicans that he was after. I mean, we're still dealing with that today, Mario. So, um,
The
you
work is
know,
not done.
the work is still not done. We've a long way to go.
So you mentioned the Facebook group, which we can put a link up
Yes.
to have folks click on that. How much are you trying to raise to restore the clubhouse?
So we're looking at right now putting together a project budget of between 3 to 5 million.
Okay.
The actual house itself, we're hoping with this particular Facebook launch and fundraising is hopefully up to 500,000. But our actual intent is to not only repair the house, but also recapture the historical stories and documents and artifacts and memorabilia of all of the different years of our LULAC Council and the history of our community here in Houston, but also nationally. So it's going to have a historical objective in maintaining and also, a teaching uh, for our future. One of the things that I often tell people is that we have remained very quiet as a community about our stories, and history comes back and haunts us again with the abuses. And so until we know what has happened in the past and we share this history and we refuse to allow it to be repeated, I believe that we will continue to be victimized and abused. Uh,
Yeah. And we really appreciate you sharing all of this with us because we will, do our part and get this out there. I mean, I'm going to tell everyone I know now that this program turned into Head Start at LULAC Council
yeah,
60 started. I mean, HUD, these things that they're familiar with. This is incredible history and knowledge, and it's directly tied to the community here. It's
right.
fascinating.
Yeah. So the council continues to work. We continue to grow our membership. People are very involved right now with making sure that our community gets information about vaccinations, information about COVID, information. Right now, our biggest challenge will be education, since so many of our students are probably about a year behind now. That is a huge concern. We are probably our Hispanic students are the biggest part of the demographics in terms of our HISD, which is one of the largest school districts. And we've got a lot to catch up on.
So when the building is restored, you mentioned recapturing history and document. Will this be used as a museum type
We're
of
hoping
institution?
we're in the throes of finalizing our plans, and
Okay.
so part of it is going to be museum, but high touch. In other words, it'll probably be mediums that they can bring up information for people. We don't have much space. We will have probably the bottom floor for community space for organizations and for our LULAC. And then we're going to attempt to rent out the top offices to have some sort of, funding coming in
Mm-hmm.
for maintenance of the building and so forth. So that's the other thing. We're hoping that we can have enough in the fundraising that we might be able to buy some additional property to expand some of the programs and some of the needs
Oh,
as
wow.
well.
Okay.
Yeah.
So for people who aren't familiar, where is the clubhouse located?
3004 Bagby in Midtown. And most of the time, most people don't even see it because they're kind of rounding the corner on Bagby. It's a block away from where everybody eats. It's Harry's Restaurant. So that's another place I like to eat. So it's just a block down, and it's yeah, they can see it, and it does have a national what is it, a marker on there as well.
Gotcha.
So, yeah,
Wow.
we we have great hopes for that organization, the actual build out and the fundraising. We're hoping people will recognize its importance. And it's not just about here locally and the state, but it is nationally as well.
Hmm. Well, we want to do our part to help, which was why
Yeah.
we thought it would be beneficial to have you join us and to talk about the history, to talk about the building, the goal, what y'all want to do with the restoration. And I mean, it sounds like it would be not only a great way to recapture and to tell that story and the history, but also future benefit to the city, just being able to host community organizations and have some office space.
And I should say that the city also has designated it as a protected landmark as well. So we have, and it is also been incorporated into TERS 2.
Mm-hmm.
So we're hoping that the TERS will also be helping in terms of some of the needs and the infrastructure that we might need as well. So we've done quite a bit. Now we're waiting for hopefully a charitable designation for tax purposes.
Yep.
And we're waiting on that final decision. But for the most part, we have been working really hard. It has been a labor of love. It has not been overnight. Like I said, because of Harvey, we were fortunate that the National Trust was able to get a designation. We were able to get an initial grant for 140,000 that helped with getting some professionals because of the historic nature of the building. There are certain requirements that
Right.
have to be followed, and unfortunately, that costs money. And then we had to at least stabilize the building, put a roof and the foundation. So that came in very handy. And then we got another grant from Houston Endowment that allowed us to wrap the building up and seal it and put a security fence around it. And so all of that are extra cost.
Uh-huh.
And for the moment, it's okay. But now it's trying to get it to that final restoration point.
Well, we're going to encourage everyone listening and watching to go to the Facebook page to make a contribution, support this campaign. Is there anything else people can do if they want to help, if they want to contribute beyond a donation?
Well, we are it is the building itself, the asset was put under a new nonprofit organization called C60 Inc. So that it's not part of our actual LULAC Council 60, but the LULAC Council members are very involved in helping our C60 board to try to develop the fundraising and develop the information and the need for support. C60 currently, the board president is Mr. Ray Valdez, and we have been fortunate enough to have several board members that have been very instrumental in helping us with, the exposing of this project and as well as the support. We even have Mr. McKinney,
Oh,
as
yeah.
you know. He's part of a great group of people working really diligently to help bring the restoration to happen, as well as Dr. Jean Preuss. Dr. Preuss is a history professor at the University of Houston, downtown. He's been him and his wife Mary have been very instrumental in helping us, obtain some of these stories, some of these historical facts and researching and so forth. We also have the benefit of, Ray's wife. And so she's an attorney and she's been Lydia Tamez, been very helpful in making sure we are putting together the grants correctly, and she edits and briefs them and so forth and so on. So there are a lot of people involved, to say the least. We recently had a very tech savvy individual, Mr. Jesus Davila. Jesus has been with Landing Advisors and has been very aggressive in helping us cultivate this Facebook fundraiser, and even the Mr. Tamiz with outreach strategies that have also been very helpful. We have Council Member Gordon Kwan, who has been on board, and we're just getting a lot of help from community, and we're really excited about that. And so I just wanted to give them a shout out there for all the work they've been doing as well.
Wonderful. Well, we're happy to join the effort, and we really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us and to share the information. I know that you've got a lot on your plate and you stay busy. So
yes, I do.
thank you for talking with us this afternoon.
Thank you, Mario. I really appreciate the opportunity to bring it to the viewers and to all our Houstonians out there. We need them.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thanks for checking out another episode of the Your Houston podcast. And we are so grateful to Gracie for her time and her knowledge that she shared with us today. We have a link in the description with more information on LULAC Council 60 that you can check out. And if you're interested in joining Your Houston as a member, you can go to yourhou.com/memberships to learn more. We hope you've enjoyed our Hispanic Heritage Month series with Dr. Adriana Tamez and Gracie Saenz. We'll be back next month with more episodes. Be sure to like and subscribe to catch all of our content.